by two huge political groups throughout its history. The European People's Party on the one side and the Socialists on the other. The Liberal group had normally been the third group, but not always, but had been only slightly bigger than a lot of other very small groups, an extreme right-wing group, an extreme left-wing group, a green group laterally, and so on. But two things were happening. One was that the European People's Party had grown a little bit too large. I should explain, sorry, let me go back and explain. We start with the Socialists. That from 1979 until 1999, the Socialists were the largest group in the European Parliament. They were always larger than the EPP. Not very much, but they were the largest. In 1999, the EPP became the largest group. And one of the reasons that we got a Liberal in as president is they wanted to signal to the world the fact they'd become the largest group and do a deal with the Liberals rather than doing the traditional deal with the Socialists. It was one of the reasons we got a Liberal president, not the only one. The Socialists had started to decline because what they stood for was no longer clear. You know, in the past, the division in politics had always been about the division between a free market economy, if you were broadly centre-right, or a social market or socialist economy, if you were on the centre-left. Well, after 1989 and the collapse of the Berlin Wall and what Huntington called the end of history, that disappeared. You know, suddenly socialist parties didn't know what they believed in anymore. Bill Clinton was talking about the third way on the other side of the Atlantic, although I never really regarded the Democrats as a socialist party. Tony Blair was talking about the same thing here. Very few socialist parties remain stuck in the old socialist mould. There's a lovely line by one of the socialist thinkers at the time where he said, the trouble is, he said, that socialists no longer have ideological maps for the new terrain that they have to cross. And worse than that, some of our leaders are so arrogant that they believe they can do it without maps. And I think that was probably a comment on, you know, the Blair phenomenon, if you like. And so the Socialists I saw as being a party in decline. I think that decline continues, by the way. But the European People's Party had become the biggest, but they'd become a bit too big and a bit too quickly. And they started to fray at the edges. And you saw that particularly with the position of the British Conservatives within them, but the positions of a number of others. They were being increasingly divided between the orthodox Christian Democrats and those who joined the European People's Party because, as I say in this book, they had been bought by the money of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, which Helmut Kohl raised, whose parties were broadly centre-right, but not necessarily EPP. And one of the things happened for liberals that was very, very helpful. Whereas previously we had been divided between economic liberals and social liberals. If you look at a country like the Netherlands or a country like Denmark or many other countries, there are two liberal parties. One economic liberal and the other social liberal. Previously we've been divided. Increasingly we were united because the division in politics was no longer about how you managed the economy. It was increasingly about how you reacted to the pressures of living in a global village. And about whether your reaction was essentially drawbridge down, which for liberals it was. We were united as drawbridge down politicians. We believed in open trading arrangements with the rest of the world. We believed in dialogue with other cultures. We believe in a certain amount of migration being necessary, indeed being a good thing. Or whether you were drawbridge up, which was what was beginning to split the centre-right. The Christian Democrats increasingly believed in a quite Christian club, having nothing to do with Turkey or anything like that. If you remember at the time of the elaboration of the European Constitution, they even tried to write into the preamble a reference to Europe's Christian heritage. Europe has a very important Christian heritage, but it also has an Islamic heritage, it has a Jewish heritage, it has a secular heritage, and so on. And those tensions were working their way in the other camp. So I believe we could grow the liberal group. And yes, Claudio, you're absolutely right. I mean, it was often a case of trying to pick off people one by one to add to your group. But if you are the smaller of the three groups, every single member you get is more power, more committee votes, and so on and so forth. And I was fortunate to take a group which had 52 members when I started, and 106 members at its peak. But let me give you a health warning. Of course, the size of the European Parliament grew within that time, so it doesn't mean doubling the percentage of the Parliament that we represent. But it was, I think, for the leader of a smaller party, important to be able to do that. You asked Claudio about whether the way forward had to be, as always, to be lowest common denominator politics, or whether it can be through campaigns. It can be through campaigns. And I certainly wouldn't claim exclusive credit for Liberals in this, but different political groups in the European Parliament have run campaigns which have moved Europe forward. I will give you an example that actually has nothing to do with foreign policy, but is to do with opening up of national health services. You are aware that since, I don't know when, since 1990 something, if you fall ill in another European country, you can take your health card. It used to be a Form 101, 111, EH111, and you can get hospital treatment. Well, we have a situation at the moment where some countries have an oversupply of capacity in treating some illnesses, and other countries have an overcapacity in other areas. And this already happens if you live in Strasbourg as a French person and you want heart treatment, you go over the border to Germany, because you can get it more quickly and they've got good expertise. Well, we did a deal with Barroso towards the end of the last Parliament where we said we will support your renomination as Commission President, providing you do two things. One of them was the Patients' Rights Directive. The other was a comprehensive directive against discrimination. And he brought forward both. And we're currently having a debate about whether, if you want health treatment in Exeter and there's a bed free in Eindhoven, whether you shouldn't just be able to go over and get your treatment there straight away. So that is also a way of driving the union forward. And, you know, the political parties are more important in this. Until 2004, the President of the European Commission was chosen genuinely by the heads of state and government in a kind of process of open competition. But in 1999, as I said, the European People's Party became the biggest party. And yet the heads of state and government chose Romano Prodi, nominally centre-right, but who then took his party onto the centre-left, as President of the Commission. And from the following election, the European People's Party insisted that if they were the largest party in the election, after the election, then they wanted the President of the Commission to come from their party. And that's why we got Barroso.